Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really crucial in the modern business world, using English effectively for communication.
That's right.
We're drawing insights from a guide, actually one designed for Thai BBA students, but really, think of this as your fast track. It's about understanding the core ideas of communicating clearly, persuasively, in English, in, well, a business setting.
Yeah, whether you're prepping for a meeting with a global team or just trying to get a handle on international business trends.
Or maybe you're just curious about how it all works across borders. We think we've got you covered.
And what strikes me right away looking at this material is just the sheer necessity of English now. It really hits home how vital it's become.
You mean with globalization?
Exactly. Globalization, things like the ASEAN Economic Community back in 2015, even then, English was really cementing its place as the main language for business in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more than just trade, isn't it? Here in Thailand, you see universities offering international BBA programs.
And they teach in English.
Right. But the guide makes a really interesting point. It suggests many students aren't quite as ready as they need to be for that level of English communication. It feels like a real gap.
It's definitely more than just a gap. You could call it a fundamental requirement now. The guide really hammers home that effective English isn't just, a nice to have.
Right.
It's essential. For closing deals, contributing to the economy, it emphasizes all four skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, but maybe puts a special focus on speaking and presentation.
Especially in Thailand's job market, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty competitive.
Exactly. Super competitive. And think about it. English is basically the standard corporate language for most multinationals anyway.
Okay, so the guide brings up this term, business English as a lingua franca, BELF. Could you maybe flesh that out a bit? What does that look like in practice?
Sure. BELF basically is how English gets used in the real world of business. It's the practical working language when people from different language backgrounds need to communicate.
So emails, meetings.
Yeah, spoken, written, planned presentations, spontaneous chats, face-to-face over Zoom, all of it. And what's interesting about BELF is it often prioritizes getting the meaning across clearly.
Over perfect grammar, perhaps.
Sometimes, yes. Clarity and effective communication can take precedence over ticking every single grammatical box, which can actually be quite empowering for non-native speakers,
That makes sense.
And with global interaction and labor mobility just increasing, these practical English skills, they're more in demand than ever.
Right. So, okay, with that context set, the guide dives into the building blocks. Basic English grammar. Now, I know grammar might sound a bit dry.
Yeah, it can seem that way.
But the guide frames it as absolutely vital for clear business communication. What are some key areas it flags?
Well, it starts right at the beginning. The 8 parts of speech, understanding the sentence, subject, and predicate. Basic stuff, but crucial.
The foundations.
Exactly. Then it breaks down sentence structures. Simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. And knowing these isn't just about sounding smart. It lets you build more precise arguments.
Like showing cause and effect in a proposal.
Precisely. Makes it much more persuasive if you structure it right, using, say, a complex sentence.
Okay, foundations covered. What about verb tenses? That's often a tricky spot for learners.
Oh, definitely. The guide covers the main ones, past and non-past, and they're simple, continuous, and perfect forms. Getting the timing right when something happened or will happen is just fundamental in business. Timelines, past performance.
You need accuracy there.
Absolutely.
Now, the guide specifically mentions nouns as a point of confusion for BBA students. Why nouns? And which types does it stress?
It's partly the sheer variety, I think. The guide lists loads: common, abstract, collective, mass, compound, even noun phrases, clauses acting as nouns, countable, uncountable.
That's a lot to juggle.
It is, and the confusion often comes down to things like articles a, and, the pin, or whether the noun needs a singular or plural verb. Like, is committee singular or plural? What about information?
Ah, right. Information is always singular. Committee depends.
Exactly. Getting those distinctions right is key for grammatical correctness and avoiding basic misunderstandings in your writing. The guide sees it as fundamental.
And the last grammar point it mentions is subject-verb agreement. Notes it's a key difference from Thai. Why is that so important for Thai students?
It points to a core structural difference. English verbs change form based on singular plural subjects, and the person, right, I go, he goes.
Which doesn't happen the same way in Thai.
Correct. Thai nouns don't typically mark number in that way. So Thai learners really need to consciously build the habit of matching the verb to the subject. It might seem small, but getting it wrong can sound unprofessional or even muddy the meaning.
Okay, solid foundational skills. Let's shift gears to actually using English, starting with listening. The guide really stresses how vital effective listening is. Says it hasn't always gotten the focus it deserves in teaching. Why is active listening so critical in business?
Well, if you step back, active listening is, it's the bedrock of all successful communication, isn't it? The guide's right, you can have the clearest speaker, but if the listener isn't truly engaged, truly processing,
Misunderstandings happen.
big time. Speaking gets the limelight, but listening is how we understand, interpret, respond. It's often neglected, but without it, the communication loop breaks down, especially in high-stakes business talk.
So what specific techniques does the guide suggest for becoming a better active listener?
It offers several practical things, like trying to anticipate what the speaker might say next, really focusing on the information, paraphrasing, saying it back in your own words to check you've got it. Maybe using translation for tricky bits, asking good questions, summarizing key points, doing pre-listening prep if you can, giving feedback, even non-verbally nodding, showing you're tuned in, and sort of consciously checking your own understanding as you go along.
That makes sense. Now, one challenge mentioned is understanding all the different international accents, especially maybe from native-speaking instructors from the U.S., U.K., Australia, India.
All over, yeah.
What are some perhaps surprising upsides to being exposed to that variety?
It's interesting. The guide suggests that while it's a hurdle initially, grappling with different accents can actually spark creative thinking, brainstorming.
Really?
Yeah, and it broadens your awareness of different customs, different communication styles. Practically, it just prepares you for the real global workplace. Might even open up new opportunities abroad. It builds adaptability.
The guide also mentions that deep link between language and culture, how they shape our thoughts, our worldview. How does that connect to understanding accents?
Well, language isn't just words, right? It's woven into the culture. Different cultures have different norms, different ways of structuring thoughts, and that can show up in speech patterns, in the accent itself.
So recognizing that helps.
It fosters empathy, maybe patience, reminds you that understanding someone goes beyond just decoding the words. There's a whole cultural context.
Okay, let's move on to speaking skills. Vital in things like negotiations, meetings. The guide notes that how someone speaks English in business is really influenced by their grasp of the specific situation. What kind of situational factors play a role?
Several key ones, things like how much background info is shared between speakers, their common business understanding, how urgent the communication is, time constraints, specific business procedures.
So talking to a long-term partner is different from pitching a new client under pressure.
Exactly. The style, the vocabulary, it all adapts.
The guide then really gets into effective presentation skills, obviously huge in business. What are the core things it highlights for a strong presentation in English?
It covers a lot. Understanding your topic thoroughly, but also linking it to the specific location, the audience, any cultural factors.
Know your audience.
Absolutely. Revising your materials, clarity, smooth transitions, good sentence structure, and crucially, rehearsing. Vocal warm-ups, gestures, body language, projecting confidence.
And during the presentation.
Good slides, clear title, outline, body, conclusion. Getting the audience involved, maybe asking questions, speaking clearly, elocution, eye contact, rhetoric, posture, poise, making it interesting, maybe humor, good body language, and always professionalism dress, addressing audience needs.
Preparation sounds absolutely critical. What specific steps does it advise before you even stand up there?
Non-negotiable, yeah. Practice potential Q&A. Be crystal clear on your purpose, know who'll be there, choose a good time slot, gather any cross-cultural info that might be relevant, and have all your materials, visuals, handouts ready to go.
And during the talk itself, how do you really connect and keep people engaged?
Eye contact is big. Spread it around, vary your voice, elaborate on points with examples, use gestures purposefully.
And handling questions.
Listen carefully. Thank the person. Repeat the question so everyone hears. Then give a clear, thoughtful answer, maybe with an example. Keep it engaging, like a dialogue.
Okay, shifting to meetings, another key skill. What's the advice for participating effectively in meetings held in English?
Preparation again. Review reports. Understand the agenda beforehand, during the meeting. Active participation. Listen well. Contribute your ideas respectfully. Stay on topic.
And be mindful of
cultural sensitivities, especially with tricky subjects. Ethics, too. And don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions if you're unsure about something. Be proactive. Be engaged.
Got it. Let's turn to reading comprehension. The guide frames reading as key for gaining knowledge, staying current in the global business world. What techniques does it suggest for improving understanding of written business English?
Several practical things. Choose your reading material wisely, match it to your level and interests. Skim first, get the general idea.
The gist.
Right. Then scan for specific details or keywords. Maybe use translation tools carefully for tough words. And paraphrasing what you read in your own words really helps cement understanding.
The guide also offers a framework, PRYCA, for analyzing business documents. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, PRYCA is a handy mnemonic. P is purpose. Why was this written? What's the goal?
Okay.
R is relationship, sender-audience connection, formal, informal. Y is you. How is the reader addressed? What's the tone towards them?
Makes sense.
C is content, word choice, structure, overall tone, style, the nitty-gritty. And A is action. What should happen next? Who else is affected? What's the desired outcome?
So it helps you dissect the document systematically.
Exactly. Gives you a much deeper understanding.
Now, reports versus proposals. Two common business document types. What are their main features and the key difference?
Okay, so reports primarily convey information, findings, conclusions, recommendations from research or investigation. They analyze a situation. Right. Proposals, on the other hand, are persuasive. They aim to convince the reader to approve something, a product, service, plan. So they tend to be more detailed, maybe more formal.
But they might look similar sometimes.
They can share structural elements, title page, table of contents, background, findings, conclusions, recommendations, sections. But the core difference is the goal. Reports inform for action. Proposals persuade for approval.
Okay, shifting to writing skills. The guide mentions learner autonomy becoming more important, especially for BBA students needing workforce-ready writing skills. Let's start with emails and correspondence, key considerations.
Well, email is dominant, obviously, speed, simplicity, but the guide warns about pitfalls, information overload, spam, need self-control there.
True.
Business correspondence, broadly, is any written communication in transactions, paper, or electronic. It's an important record. Formal business letters are often seen as more reliable, maybe easier to structure with standard phrases.
And culture matters here, too.
Definitely. Email conventions, etiquette, they can vary quite a bit across cultures. Crucial to remember that for international comms.
What about bigger documents, like those reports and proposals we just discussed? How should someone approach creating them?
The guide suggests 3 main stages. Plan carefully, produce a first draft, then edit and review thoroughly.
And the planning stage.
Ask 3 key questions. What's it fundamentally about? What does each specific part need to contain? And how should it all be organized logically? Answering those gives you a roadmap.
So structure is key.
Structure, clarity, conciseness, and paying attention to conventions like layout, tone, and style. They're just as important as the content itself for getting your message across effectively.
Okay, now let's navigate the global business landscape, starting with cross-cultural communication. Globalization, the guide says, ramps up the need for this written, spoken, online meetings, emails. Why is this competence so critical for Thai BBA grads?
Well, think about the world they're stepping into. It's incredibly interconnected. They will be interacting with colleagues, clients, partners from all sorts of backgrounds.
It's unavoidable.
Totally. So mastering English isn't enough. They need to understand different workplace customs, how culture shapes business, because subtle things, faces, gestures, accents, emotions, can lead to misunderstandings.
So strong cross-cultural communication skills are vital.
Absolutely. And negotiation skills, too. The guide really stresses developing these, maybe through specific business English or ESP courses, using role plays, discussions, fieldwork. It's essential prep.
The guide says understanding a language means understanding the society. What specific challenges might Thai students face expressing themselves effectively in English or keeping up with the pace of international business talk?
Even with early English learning, fluency in expressing complex ideas or navigating fast-paced discussions can be a hurdle. Differences in communication styles, like how direct people are, can vary hugely. And then there are the unspoken cultural assumptions that often underpin business interactions elsewhere. It takes time and exposure to pick those up.
Building rapport across cultures is another piece. The guide says trust can be tricky due to different values, business practices. It mentions tacit values. What are those and how do they affect trust?
Tacit values are like the unwritten rules, the shared, often implicit understandings within a culture about what's important, how things are done. They're deeply ingrained.
And they shape trust.
Massively. The guide points to things like individualism versus collectivism, group versus individual focus, or tolerance for ambiguity, views on hierarchy. These deeply influence how trust is built and perceived in business.
Interesting. The guide then contrasts characteristics of people from low-power distance cultures. What are some of those traits?
People from low-power distance cultures tend to value independence, equality. Communication is often more direct, low context, less reading between the lines. They might be more flexible with time, more comfortable with uncertainty, open to new ideas, and maybe prefer shorter negotiations focused on mutual adaptation. Understanding this helps when interacting with people from higher power distance cultures, where hierarchy indirectness might be more the norm.
Let's turn to networking in English.
Yeah.
Crucial for careers, especially in Thailand's changing economy. The guide suggests networking is pretty universal professionally. Why is networking in English so important globally?
Because English is the global business language, right? And so much networking happens online now, too. Being able to build and maintain professional connections in English is just fundamental.
That's how you find opportunities.
Exactly. Information, support, insights into industries, companies, jobs, especially when you're starting out, it's vital.
The guide mentions relationship building, even the role of friendship in business partnerships. And cultural differences, again, contracts versus social interaction focus. What's the key takeaway for building cross-cultural connections?
I think the main idea is that while strong business relationships are the goal everywhere, how you get there can vary a lot. Some cultures prioritize formal contracts first.
Get it in writing.
Right. Others put more initial emphasis on personal rapport, social interaction, building trust that way. The guide suggests being adaptable, understanding the local norms, and often nurturing both formal and informal ties works best.
So what practical networking strategies does it recommend for BBA students using English?
Several things. Leverage your peer network. Seek out mentors. Use professional social media platforms actively and critically. Follow up.
The follow-up is key.
Absolutely. Send thank you messages. Stay in touch about shared interests. Offer help. It's not just collecting contacts. It's about nurturing relationships over time.
Okay, negotiation skills, another absolute must-have. The guide defines it as reaching agreements amid conflicting interests. Notes English is the main language internationally. What are the three main stages it outlines?
It breaks it down nicely. First, preparation and planning. Research the issues, define your goals, understand the other side's potential position. Crucial stage.
Homework.
Definitely. Second, the negotiation session itself. Presenting arguments, asking questions, debating, moving towards agreement. Third, agreement handling. Documenting it, monitoring implementation. But prep is number one.
The guide touches on strategies and the importance of language and tone. What's the core message there for students?
Fundamentally, it's that clear, effective, culturally aware communication is the heart of negotiation. It's not just your arguments, but how you articulate them in English, how well you listen, the tone you use.
Creating the right atmosphere.
Exactly. Fostering a collaborative environment aimed at finding common ground. Strong English communication skills are your essential tools for that whole process.
Our deep dive now hits technology's impact. Big influence on everything, guide says. Education, business.
Yeah.
How has tech reshaped communication in these areas?
It points to a huge shift, really. Moving from mass education, lectures, towards more individual learning, smart classrooms, digital tools everywhere.
Chat, blogs.
Websites, social media. Used constantly now for marketing, networking, presentations, even remote internships and interviews. Classroom tools themselves have changed dramatically, Blackboard to interactive screens. The potential to improve communication skills via tech is immense.
What specific tools does it mention, and how can professionals and students use them well?
It lists various tools for live interaction, like chat, for sharing views, like blogs or websites, for marketing and networking, like social media. For professionals, it's connecting with clients, collaborating, promoting. For students, it's practice, building an online presence, virtual opportunities.
But it's not just about the tech.
No, the guide reminds us interpersonal skills are still vital. Tech enables, but you still need to connect with people.
And specifically social media for business communication. What's the advice there?
Be strategic. Know your goals, know your audience. Use it for things like announcements, new products, partnerships, responding to inquiries.
Like Twitter for quick updates.
Yeah, sharing blog links, conference news, product info. The key is using it purposefully to facilitate communication, build your brand, foster relationships.
Okay, moving towards the end of our exploration. Case studies in business communication. The guide stresses the need for Thai professionals to boost their English effectiveness, especially with ASEAN integration. It mentions a study on financial personnel. What key communication skills did that study identify?
It found several critical areas. The specific communication functions needed in finance roles, using discourse markers, effectively words like so, however, to guide the conversation,
Okay.
arranging and delivering messages appropriately, handling different formality levels, verbally and non-verbally, cultural knowledge, relevant IT skills, and, crucially, confidentiality. It shows how complex effective communication is in these specific intercultural contexts.
The guide also talks about analyzing successful companies via case studies. What basic questions should students ask, and what frameworks might help?
Start simple. What's the company? How big is it? Where does it operate? What does it sell? Then for deeper analysis, maybe use something like Porter's 5 forces for competition, or just focus on key competitors' communication. But whatever you use, the guide says, present it clearly. Understandable language is key.
Learning from failures is also valuable, it seems. What kinds of misunderstandings did the guide highlight in cross-cultural scenarios?
Some good examples. A Japanese gesture of politeness being missed by someone unfamiliar with it. A Thai speaker perhaps over-explaining something that seemed obvious in a more direct culture.
Nuances.
Exactly. Different perceptions of timing. Visual aids intended humorously but landing wrong across cultures. Even with translation tools, issues with word choice or giving feedback can pop up. Shows how easily wires can get crossed without awareness.
Let's look at assessment and feedback. Assessment is gathering info for judgments. What different types does the guide mention, and what's the point of course evaluation?
It outlines 3 types. Assessment for learning ongoing feedback to improve teaching and learning. Assessment as learning students self-monitoring their progress. And assessment of learning measuring outcomes, usually at the end. Course evaluation, then, is about judging the course itself. Did it meet objectives? Were methods good? Students engaged? Materials relevant? That feedback is vital for making the course better next time.
And self-assessment, plus receiving feedback from others. How does the guide frame those?
It suggests students should learn to critique their own communication, like their presentation skills, maybe use visuals or matrices to analyze things. Feedback from others, though, is presented as absolutely crucial.
Why so crucial?
It bridges the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Gives you that external perspective on strengths, weaknesses, helps you pinpoint what to work on. It really accelerates progress from novice to proficient.
Finally, continuous improvement. English is vital globally, guide reiterates. It mentions a new English for Communication course for Thai BBA students. What kinds of activities does that course use?
It sounds quite practical. General speaking practice, business case discussions applying skills in context, individual presentations, retelling stories with visuals, boosting narrative skills. The goal seems to be giving them really relevant practical skills for their careers.
The guide also talks about setting goals and finding resources for ongoing learning. What's the message on goals, and what resources are recommended?
It notes that learners and teachers might have different goals, so it's important for teachers to understand what students actually aim for, like better listening and speaking in business English specifically. For continued learning, it suggests things like TV series, films with or without subtitles, news websites with audio, podcasts, language apps.
And for speaking.
Repeating dialogues from shows, learning English songs, lyrics, singing, recording yourself, karaoke apps or websites that might offer feedback. Basically, actively engaging with English in varied, enjoyable ways outside the classroom.
Well, this really has been a proper deep dive into English for business communication. Pulling from that guide for Thai BBA students, we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have.
From why English is so fundamental globally, the grammar basics, the core skills, listening, speaking, reading, writing, through to cross-cultural nuances, networking, negotiation, text role.
Yeah, it's quite comprehensive.
Hopefully this has given you, our listener, a really clear shortcut to understanding these absolutely critical elements.
And what's fascinating, I think, is seeing how it all connects. It's not just about the language itself, the words, the grammar. It's about cultural intelligence, building relationships, using the right tools, all coming together for successful communication in this interconnected world.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to mull over. Based on everything we've discussed today, which specific area of English business communication really resonates with you right now? Is it listening, presentations, cross-cultural awareness?
What feels most relevant to your goals?
Exactly. Think about how you could actively find resources or create chances to practice that specific skill in your own world. Because remember, ultimately, effective communication isn't just about language mastery. It's about genuinely understanding people and the cultures they come from. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.